Hey everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. I originally had something else I planned to talk about today, but then I got an email from somebody who has a situation that I see far too often this time of year, and that is that she has kids that are underweight. Last summer, I did a live stream, which you can still find on my YouTube channel, about monitoring kids' weight gain when they're little so that you don't wind up in this situation. Because the number one post that people read on my blog this time of year is diarrhea in goats. And if a kid is between um, 3 weeks and 5 months of age, the most common cause of diarrhea is coccidiosis. And the reason that you see a lot of that is because kids don't get enough milk, they don't grow fast enough, their immune system is compromised, and so then they are very susceptible to something like coccidiosis, to worms, things like that. And if a kid has chronic coccidiosis for too long, it can damage the lining of their intestines, and then they're just never going to absorb nutrients properly, which means that they're going to be small and sickly their whole lives. So that's why it's really, really important that kids get enough milk when they are little. And like I said, if you're a breeder, be sure to watch that video that I did last year where I talk about tracking weight gain. You cannot do the old fashioned, oh, just feel the tummy thing. That's just going to keep a kid from starving. And I don't know about you, but just not starving is not good enough for my kids. I want my kids to actually thrive. And that means that they are going to hit 20 pounds by 8 to 10 weeks of age. And then by the time they are 7 or 8 months old, they will be much more likely to hit that 2/3 of their adult weight, which means they're big enough to be bred. So for Nigerians, that means I want them to be 40 pounds before they're going to be bred. And you don't want to breed them when they're any smaller because they're going to have to put so much of their energy into growing still that there's a really good chance they're not going to make enough milk. In addition to that, if they're too small, you're going to wind up with a C-section, which is really expensive. So let me get to her question. And basically, she has 4 dolings that are all around 6.5 months old. And as far as she knows, they were never treated for coccidiosis or given any kind of a preventative for that. They have not been wormed or dewormed. She was told that they got colostrum from the mom before being put on a bottle of full fat cow's milk, and then they were weaned at 8 weeks. She says that they're eating free choice minerals and baking soda and hay, and they have fresh water, and they've been getting half a cup of a goat grain. Um, and they're also on pasture. And she said that they are all underweight and seem small, and she's not sure what she's doing wrong. And so I wrote back and told her, I asked what she meant when she said they were small, and she said that they're all around 20 pounds. And this is at 6 months of age. So that 20 pounds is what I want to see my kids weigh when they are only 8 to 10 weeks of age. I will not sell a kid. It will not leave this farm until it is at least 20 pounds. Um, Again, go back and watch that video where I talk about this at length. For many years, I just did what everybody else did. Oh, feel the tummy. If it feels like they're a little golf ball, it's good. It's really sad that these kids were bottle fed. It sounds like they just were not given enough milk, which is really unfortunate. If they were bottle fed, they really, really should have been 20 pounds by the time they were, a couple months old, because it's not like it's not like the people didn't know that they weren't getting enough milk. So it sounds like somebody raised them who didn't realize how much milk they needed. So and then they were just weaned much too early. I mean, I can only imagine what these poor kids weighed when they were 2 months old if they're only at 20 pounds at 6 months. It is so important that kids get enough milk when they are little. Nothing else has the same concentration of protein and calcium that milk does. And since the milk is liquid, the kids can consume a lot of it, and it gets absorbed into their stomach really quickly and really easily. And so there is no way that kids can get enough protein and calcium from solid foods to replace what they can get from milk. So to grow, you need lots of protein and calcium. You need lots of protein for muscle mass. You need lots of calcium for bones. And so, unfortunately, the kids are 6 months old. There's really nothing you can do in terms of milk at this point because they've not had it for 4 months. They would have no idea what it was. So, at this point in the game, all you can do is feed them as much high protein feed as other food that as they can consume. And like I said, there's at only 20 pounds, there's not a lot that they're going to be able to stuff into their little tummies. So that's going to mean a goat feed that is 16% protein. And then you want alfalfa hay and or alfalfa hay pellets. Has to be alfalfa. Alfalfa has twice as much protein as grass hay. So if you're feeding grass hay to kids that need to be putting on a lot of weight, that's a waste. It's a huge waste of space. Like that is going to fill up their little tummy twice as fast. Um, it's not, or it's going to fill up their tummy and they're going to get half as much protein and calcium is what they would get from alfalfa. So kids that are that tiny really need protein and calcium. And so alfalfa hay or alfalfa hay pellets is a good way to do that. A 16% goat feed, 16% protein goat feed is what they need also. And I don't normally recommend um, medicated feed be fed routinely. But in this case, there is a very good chance that these kids are dealing with coccidiosis because they are so underweight and their immune system is not going to be functioning at its best. So I would get a bag of medicated feed for them and just one bag. And when it's gone, it's gone. Switch to an unmedicated 16% protein feed because you don't want to feed a medicated feed long term. Typically, what they are for is to be fed during times of stress. So if you're weaning kids, if you're selling kids, that's the time that you just feed the medicated feed during that transition time. Medicated feed is for the prevention of coccidiosis. All goats have coccidia in their gut, and the medicated feed slows down that reproduction. When goats get stressed, the coccidia can reproduce like crazy and cause them to get coccidiosis, which is the disease caused by too much coccidia. And so the medicated feed interferes with the life cycle of the coccidia, and it's not going to be able to reproduce that fast. It's completely different than medication that is used to treat coccidia. The other thing too that this person did not mention is that it would be really important to check these kids' eyelids because you want them to be bright pink or red. I would not be surprised if these kids' eyelids are a very light pink or even white. If they're white, then that's deadly anemic. Like that means that their PCV is below 17, which is extremely anemic. If it's down and you don't know, once they're white, it just does there's nothing it can look worse than white. So like you don't know, like if it's just a smidge under 17, they can recover pretty quickly. But if you're getting close to single digits, that's a kid that could die, tomorrow morning. You walk out there and it could be dead. So it's really important um, that you know what their anemia status is. Anemia is usually caused by barber pole worm. You can also see anemia in cases of severe coccidiosis. But the kids don't currently have diarrhea, I know that's a huge misconception is that a kid with coccidiosis will have diarrhea, and it's not always the case. I know when I was fairly new to goats, I thought that because that's just what you always hear is that it is a cause of diarrhea. But lack of diarrhea doesn't mean that they don't have coccidiosis. Slow weight gain should always make you think of the possibility of coccidiosis. And coccidia can be extremely easy to miss on a fecal because they're very, very tiny. So somebody who's not quite as experienced or whatever might miss it. So I always say this, I'm not a huge fan of fecals because a fecal can confirm, but it cannot rule out parasites. So just because you have a negative fecal, it just means that there weren't any worm eggs or Coccidia oocysts in that particular sample. You could do a sample later, and there could be lots of worm eggs or Coccidia oocysts in there. And so it's very important that the kids get lots of protein and calcium to help them grow. Also, check the eyelids to see if they are anemic. And that's something that a lot of people say you should do every week, is to check the eyelids in your goats to make sure that they're not anemic, because that is something that can change fairly quickly, especially in the middle of summer when the kids are on pasture, or when any goats are on pasture. And then pasture rotation, of course, is extremely important. And so that's another thing as well, is that if these kids have been on the same piece of grass for as long as they have been on her farm, then they are just continuously ingesting worm larvae as well as Coccidia oocysts. And so that could be making the problem worse also. So it is, like I said, it's super common for me to get questions like this throughout the summer. Last year, I addressed it from the breeder's perspective for how this can be prevented. But then I just get a ton of questions, and I decided when I got this question today, like, okay, this is just the beginning. So I'll be able to share this video when other people this summer send me very similar emails, unfortunately. If you have any questions, feel free to post in the comment section below and I'll respond. Thanks so much. Bye for now.